of RSSDI Delhi chapter, member of Executive Board, Diabetes India, Honorary Secretary of Indian Obesity member of ACE International Committee 2014, 2016 to 17, and ACE Professor Business Committee, and international work exposure of UCSF San Francisco, Cleveland Clinic, and John Hopkins and Oxford Diabetes Center, and also Mayo Clinic. He's a course director for Cleveland Clinic Advanced Certificate course in diabetes from 2010. And he has many publications, books, and national and international journals. So I'd like to request him to start his session. I'm stop sharing my screen and I request him to share his screen. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Rutul, for a very kind introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Perfectly okay.
Can I share my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, is this okay on your screen now?
Yes, yes, sir.
Great. So, good afternoon, everyone on the other side listening to this presentation. I think it's a great meeting that's going on since yesterday, and I've been glued to so many sessions that I have, attended during last 2 days, and the content and the speakers, everything has been phenomenal. And I must thank my dear friend Bansi Sabu for giving me this great opportunity and involving me in this program. So my topic here is fatty liver in busy clinical practice, and I'll touch upon some management issues and how we should go about that. I don't have any disclosures for this presentation. So the presentation layout is that I'll be briefly speaking about fatty liver. What do we know about this? What we actually see in the real world scenario, what are the management issues in busy practice, and what we should do about it. So first thing is fatty liver. Fatty liver or NAFLD, which are the words are used synonymously, though they are not synonymous, is characterized by excessive fat accumulation associated with the insulin resistance in liver, and is defined by the presence of steatosis of more than 5% of hepatocytes according to histological analysis. Or this may also be defined as proton density fat fraction of more than 5.6% assessed on the proton MR spectroscopy. Now, NAFLD actually comprises of two very distinct and pathophysiologically distinct entities with different prognosis. One is the non-alcoholic fatty liver, which includes only pure steatosis, that is fat accumulation, or fat accumulation with mild lobular inflammation. And the second component is NASH or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which includes a wider spectrum of involvement of liver ranging from very early or almost no fibrosis progressing to increasing fibrosis, ultimately progressing to cirrhosis and increased risk of hepatocellular carcinoma. Now this slide just shows you that NAFLD is a continuum, and it progresses from normal liver to gradually to NFL, NASH, and finally cirrhosis. And what we know about all this is that this progression takes a long time. From normal liver, there is a deposition of fat, progression to NASH, fibrosis, and ultimately cirrhosis and hepatocellular carcinoma. But some of the patients may not develop cirrhosis and directly go on to develop HCC. Now, important thing here is the first part, that is before the development of fibrosis, this can be a reversible phase. This is the phase of fatty liver or early fat NAFL, which we should recognize and act. Because we have to identify this early, one, because once there is fibrosis, it is going to go on progressing, and as the fibrosis progresses, there is decrease in the survival possibility or increase in the mortality risk. And if you look at this slide, as compared to patients who do not have any NAFLD, there is markedly increased mortality related to liver-related disease, cardiovascular disease, or overall mortality in patients with NAFLD, and it is further increased in patients with NASH. And please note here that there is not only increase in the liver-related mortality, in fact, there is a significant increase in cardiovascular mortality also. Now, we know that NAFLD is a big problem. There is a high prevalence globally, and it is estimated that 25% of the world population has some degree of NAFLD. Studies in India suggest that we have anything between 10 to 30% of the general population in India who's having, high prevalence of NAFLD. This was the first population-based study from Chennai from Dr. Mohan's group, and they looked at the prevalence of NAFLD in urban South Indian population, its relation to dysglycemia and metabolic syndrome. And what they showed was that 22.5% of the people with normal glucose tolerance had NAFLD, while it was 33% in patients with pre-diabetes and more than 50% in patients with diabetes. And if you look at this table, not only it was the dysglycemia which has strong predisposition for NAFLD, there was a strong association with obesity, abdominal obesity, components of dyslipidemia, and metabolic syndrome. What happened? I think there's something went wrong. Okay. So study concluded that NAFLD is present in about a third of Asian Indian population in South India, and it's increasing. The prevalence increases with the increasing severity of glucose intolerance and metabolic syndrome. This is another study which looked at various clinical parameters and insulin resistance and showed that possibly central obesity and insulin resistance are two key underlying pathophysiological defects in patients with NAFLD. Now, we know that India has a very high prevalence of diabetes, with more than 77 million diabetes patients in India, and we Indians also have a higher insulin resistance as compared to Caucasian population. Not only this, even Indian children have been shown to have very high degree of insulin resistance as compared to other populations in the world. And we also know that we have a typical Asian phenotype, which is characterized by central obesity, less of peripheral fat, low lean muscle mass, and high risk for developing cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome. Now, if you look at the NAFLD and cardiovascular disease, they both have common metabolic risk factors such as obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. And though there are common, associations, the studies have also shown that NAFLD is also independently associated with cardiovascular disease if we take care of the confounders. Cardiovascular disease has been shown to be the most common cause of death in patients with NAFLD. Now, this was a very recently published study from PGH Chandigarh. They looked at prevalence of fatty liver NAFLD in healthy male voluntary blood donors, and basically it was an ultrasound-based diagnosis, and they found that almost 55% of the patients had fatty liver on ultrasonography. So this shows that we have a high number of people in general population who have fatty liver disease. And the study also showed that age, BMI, increased waist circumference, high systolic blood pressure, increased total cholesterol, and number of components of metabolic syndrome all were independent predictors of presence of NAFLD. So NAFLD is the most common cause of liver disease worldwide. It affects almost 20% of the general population, or 1/3 to 1/2 of Indian adults have some degree of NAFLD, as we are seeing from the recent studies. The important thing is, though we know all this, the prevalence and incidence of recorded NAFLD diagnosis in real world situation is practically unknown. So let us see what we find in the real world scenario in clinical practice. So I couldn't find any studies on the diagnostic prevalence or the levels of NAFLD in the primary care practice in India, but this was a fantastic study which I found from BMJ Medicine. This is a study which looked at harmonized health records from 4 major European countries: UK, Italy, Spain, and Netherlands. And this assessed the age and sex-specific point prevalence and incidence of NAFLD from primary healthcare databases of these 4 countries. The study involved 17.7 million adults, of which 176,000 had recorded diagnosis of NAFLD. Comparing between 2007 and 2014, the prevalence had increased from 0.6% to 1.85%. So if you look at the prevalence of NAFLD in this study was very, very negligible, and it's only 1.85% in 2014. The incidence doubled from 1.32 to 2.35 per 1,000 person years in 2014. And they also looked at the FIB4 non-invasive estimate of liver fibrosis and could calculate that about 30% had intermediate or high risk scores for liver fibrosis. There was no difference in this prevalence in sexes, and there was increased prevalence in the higher ages, more than 60 years. Now, if you look at the gaps in the data that we have from very controlled or scientific studies, then the data we have is that by imaging we know that there is almost 24% of people who have NAFLD and almost 13% by blood tests. And if you look at the pooled prevalence from this European database, only 1.9% were having NAFLD, which is at best 1/6 or 1/12 of the estimate from the studies that we have. So what we are seeing is that there is underreporting of the data or the underdiagnosis of this entity in clinical practice. So there is a large shortfall in Europe between the expected numbers and the numbers recorded in diagnosis. And there's a huge diagnostic gap in 4 European territories. And this under-recording of NAFLD in primary care may reflect that there are missed opportunities to make diagnosis by investigating abnormal liver enzymes or imaging, a lack of confidence to make diagnosis even if the enzyme reports are available, or under recognition of the diagnosis in secondary care. Also, there is a factor that a lot of people take alcohol, and those who are taking alcohol, whether you have to label them NAFLD or no, again becomes a question. So this is another small study from Dutch database, Dutch physicians, a recent survey of Dutch general practitioners, which looked at the attitudes of how they gave importance to NAFLD, and they found only about 47% of doctors used liver tests patients who had NAFLD, and non-invasive scores were never used by almost 3/4 of the physicians. So moral of the story is that NAFLD is significantly underreported or a significant misdiagnosis in real-world clinical practice. Now, if you look at the management issues in busy clinical practice in India, Indian scenario is very, very different. In primary healthcare, we do not have any data. Data is virtually non-existent, even in the physician level practice or the hospital care practice also. Healthcare is largely private practice, which is out-of-pocket payment. So that complicates the issue because finance becomes a challenge, and India is not a very rich country. We have largely poor or lower middle income patients. Large number of patients are there for every physician in the clinical practice. So only limited time is available per patient, and the attention cannot be given to minor details. Second thing is, if you advise additional investigations, it costs additional money. So increased cost becomes a challenge when patient has to pay out of pocket, and patient's only concern is that please treat my primary problem. I'm not willing to go for any further investigation or treatment for other illnesses which are possibly silent problems and may not have any harm in long term. So NAFLD is very, very likely to be missed in physical clinical practice in India also. So what should we do Now, in such situation, we have to identify the risk factors. If somebody has diabetes, obesity, dyslipidemia, metabolic syndrome, and so on, we should look for NAFLD. AASLD recommends that in type 2 diabetes patients suspect NAFLD and NASH and determine patients' risk for advanced fibrosis. And if there is increasing number of metabolic diseases, there is increasing risk of progressive liver disease. ESL, ESD, ESO recommendations are that NAFLD screening is recommended in persons who have high risk of CVD, those including metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. ADA recommends that patients with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes with elevated liver enzymes should be evaluated for presence of NASH and liver fibrosis. Now, what are the current strategies for identifying NASH and fibrosis? I will not go into the various technique or details. Now, important thing to keep in mind is that there is no single investigation which gives you a diagnosis. Measuring liver enzymes has its own problems, and AST, ALT values may not be very sensitive parameters to diagnose NAFLD and NASH. Similarly, ultrasound and CT scan cannot identify most of the NAFLD stages or severity. They may be ultrasound may be helpful in picking up fatty liver or advanced cirrhosis, but not all the different stages. Similarly, CT has limitations. The only gold standard is liver biopsy, but it has its own limitation because it involves an invasive procedure, risk of bleeding, cost, and you may need to repeat to evaluate the patient, and so on. So because of this, we have some newer strategies which have got devised, and there are some serum-based scores which include liver enzyme parameters, platelet count, BMI, albumin levels. And because based on these scores, you can have a good negative predictive value for ruling out liver fibrosis. Their calculators are available freely on net. Most common parameters used for scores are age, AST, ALT, platelet count, BMI, albumin, and dysglycemia. And you can see there is an NAFLD score and a FIB-4 score, which are commonly used. There is FibroScan or vibration controlled transient elastography, which can be used, which is the point of care equipment, does not require any specialist to run the test and can rule in or rule out advanced fibrosis. But the cost is a limitation as of now. This is a good tool for ruling out the advanced hepatic fibrosis, but can overestimate fibrosis otherwise. MRI can be used. Again, the cost is an issue. Now, important thing here is we have the huge number of options what we can do. Important thing is we need to customize according to our practice, the kind of patients we see, the kind of facilities we have available, and the kind of cost patient can afford, and what is required for a particular patient. To bring it all together, the non-invasive serum tests and scores can reliably exclude advanced fibrosis, while non-invasive elastography is important to confirm the fibrosis. So you can choose between what you need to do. Second thing is, there is a school that says that since there is no treatment for NASH, so you don't need to diagnose it. The approach is wrong because lifestyle interventions have been shown to improve fatty liver disease in the early stages, and there can be reversal of fatty liver to normal liver with the moderate weight loss, modest weight loss, and good dietary behavior and exercise. And bariatric surgery has been shown to improve NASH and NAFLD. Globally, there are no approved drugs, but India has the first approved drug for NASH, which is saroglitazar. And other drugs like metformin is not recommended. Pio is recommended, but should be used only in patients with NAFLD who have biopsy-proven NASH. GLP-1 RAs are being studied for same, and so is the situation with SGLT2 inhibitors. Vitamin E has been recommended, but again, there are issues. It is not recommended for NASH in diabetic patients or NAFLD without a liver biopsy or cirrhotic patients. Saroglitazar has been, approved on the basis of evidence 2 trial, which showed that saroglitazar brings down the liver fat, improves the liver enzyme, and cuts down the disease activity in liver. There are a number of drugs which are in study, but as of now, we do not have anything in hand. There is something called obeticholic acid in NASH, for which the papers have been submitted to FDA for approval. Let's see what happens. So to sum up my presentation, NAFLD NASH is growing rapidly, not only globally, but also in India. NAFLD is more prevalent in people with obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes, and very common in Indians. NAFLD has become a leading factor for liver transplantation, not only and is not only associated with liver-related mortality, but also with increased cardiovascular mortality. Early recognition of NAFLD is important, especially the fatty liver, to prevent NASH, cirrhosis, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Lifestyle intervention and weight reduction should be given primary focus when you come across such patients, and drugs like saroglitazar and pioglitazone may be of some help, or in morbidly obese patients with NAFLD, bariatric surgery can be advised. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and I think I am happy to take any questions if there are there.
Yes, sir. There is a question from Dr. Harsh Hirani. How do you plan dosing of ursodeoxycholic acid based on confirmed graded fatty liver by USG or elastography? Also, is there any biochemical parameters based criteria to predict the grading of fatty liver based on lab values of liver function test?
So, first thing is UDCA is not an approved medication for treatment of fatty liver. So I don't know anything about how you choose the dose, about the grading. Second thing is about the grading based on the lab values. There are some studies which have shown that if you have the ALT and AST ratios calculated, they can be helpful, but they are again still not very much validated.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
One more question is there. Where would you put usefulness of NAFLD fibrosis score in your clinical practice?
Which score?
NAFLD fibrosis score.
So these are two scores which I showed you in my presentation. One is you can choose any score, and you can actually have calculators downloaded to your phone. They are helpful, but important thing is they will be helpful only if you have early disease. Once you have and not diagnose these patients early in the course of disease, or you are not looking for diagnosis of these patients early in the course of presentation, when actually they don't have any symptoms of NAFLD. So practically anybody who is obese and diabetic walking into your clinic, you have to suspect NAFLD.
Right.
So what you need to do is, basic requirements is, one, do a clinical examination. If you feel liver is there, liver edge is there and firm, you suspect NAFLD. Second is ultrasonography, which can be advised to large number of these patients. A non-invasive test, not very expensive. Third is the liver enzymes. If they are increased, again you suspect this. If you have diabetes, you have dyslipidemia, you have hypertension, you have metabolic syndrome, all these are candidates for suspecting this. So once you suspect this, then you can use these scores to define whether these patients have high risk for fibrosis. If you have high risk for fibrosis, you can screen them further with FibroScan.